Today we are going to set up animations with our character using the sprite sheets provided with the package we downloaded in the Unity Asset Store. So if you go to Free Platform Game Assets, and then you go to Character, and then you go to Character Animation, and then Idle, as you can see we have a sprite sheet of multiple images, and those images, once you put them together, form an animation. So to split up these images, all we have to do is click on the sprite sheet. Then we go to, in the inspector on the right where it says sprite mode, we put multiple, meaning there's multiple images in this sprite. And then we go to sprite editor right here. And we are going to apply. So Unity has a nice built-in function that slices the sprite sheet for you automatically. So all we would have to do in this case is go to slice, and if we put the type to automatic and then press slice, Unity will automatically determine where the sprites are located and then separate them into their corresponding parts. If you wanted to get more customized, you can also do the type by cell size, and then you can alter how much you want it to slice it by. So in this case it would be 64 pixels, and you would slice it at every 64 pixels. You can also add an offset between slices, and then you can add a padding, and the padding is basically the boundaries of the sprite sheet. So if you wanted it to start maybe 20 pixels out from the edge, then you would just put 20 in the X for padding. So then all we have to do now is click apply, and then we can exit out of this. So now if we click the sprite sheet we were on and we click the little arrow, now we can see our sprite sheet has been separated into multiple sprites. And so now it's really easy to make an animation for our character. So all we have to do is click the first animation, and then you press shift and you click the last animation. So you basically select all the animations, then you right click on the animation, create, and then you create an animation. And then we can call that animation idle. So how can we add this to our character? So first we want to go to our hierarchy on the left, then we go to player, and as you can see we have a cube that we used as a placeholder for the previous videos. So let's remove that cube, let's remove the mesh filter and the mesh renderer since we won't need that, and let's add a new component called Sprite Render. And now we can add in a sprite, so we can just drag the first one from the idle sprite. If we click on player, we can just drag that idle sprite there, and our sprite will be appearing. And then we want to make sure we select a sorting layer that is above the others, so we can make sure we see our player above all the other rendered materials. So let's put it in its own sorting layer, and let's call that player. And then we go back to player, and let's put the sorting layer to player. So now it's above all the other sorting layers. And I just noticed that my scene is backwards, so I'm just gonna rotate around the scene. So here's our player character, and I'm going to increase the scale of it a bit because it's a bit small. So under the transform, I can put it to 1.5 on the X and the Y. And that looks better. And then let's just move it on this side of the flower. And then to just add one animation component, you would add a new animation component, and you can just drag and drop that animation onto it. But Unity recommends another method so that you can manage your different states of your animations, and that's going to be called an animation controller. So let's go under assets. Let's create a new folder called animations. Double click that, and then let's right click create, and let's create an animator component, animator controller, which is down here. And let's call that player animator. And so if we double click the animator component, it will open up a new tab, and this is our animations, which we currently have none. So let's add in our previous animation. So let's go back to the folder we were at. You should see it under assets under the character animation update 1.8. And let's just drag that idle animation into our animations folder so we can be more organized. And then if we go back to our animation folder where our idle animation is now there, then we can just drag that idle animation onto the animator, and now we have an animation. So let me explain how the animator works. So this is our entry. So the entry is the beginning of the animator component. And then the entry leads to idle. So this is the default animation. So anything that connects the entry to a animation will be the default animation, and it will start to play at the beginning. And then this is our exit node, and in this case, a node is just a state. And so we use the exit node to indicate that a state machine should exit. But what is a state machine? Well, the animator component is a state machine, and a state machine basically goes from one state to another depending on the inputs you give it. So for example, if we're in our idle state, that's our default state. And then if we give it the input of running, then it will switch to a running state. And then you can use this any state node when you don't care about the state and you want it to lead to a certain animation regardless of the current state it's in. But we're not going to use that for now. Okay, so we have our idle animation state. So this should be working now. All we have to do is attach this animator component to our player. So click on the player in the hierarchy, add component, and let's add an animator component. And then we just drag and drop our animator controller into the controller portion of the animator. And another thing that we want to do is in our idle animation, since we want this idle animation to be looping forever while we're in that state, we can click the idle animation itself, and then we can just press loop time, and that will automatically cause it to loop over and over again. Awesome. So now if we play our game, then you can see that the player will be doing an idle animation. And the player is kind of floating above the air right now, and that's because of our box collider. So if we go into our scene, you can see that the box collider is too big for our player. So let's decrease the box collider size. So we can decrease the size on the Y, which is the up and down, we can just drag the Y itself and we can decrease it to about 0.7, which seems fine. And then we just want to right click on that box collider, copy component, and when we press play, our changes will not be saved. So then let's right click that box collider again and paste component values. And that will paste the values that we changed during play mode. Let's add in our other animations. So let's go to our free platform game assets, character animation update 1.8. And this time let's add a running animation. So let's choose the ऊNext one. Same process as before, we go to the right, we press multiple under sprite mode, then we apply in the bottom. Then we go to sprite editor. On the top we go to slice, and then apply. Then we have our running animation. So click the first sprite. If you don't see this, just click this arrow button, and then shift, and then press the last sprite to select all of them. So then you press right click, create, and then animation. And let's call that run animation. And then let's just drag that running animation to our animations folder in the assets folder on the left. And then let's do that one more time. Let's go back one folder by pressing up here to move folders. And then let's go to our jump animation. And then under ऊNext, we're going to do the same process. Sprite mode multiple, apply. Sprite editor, we're going to slice, automatic slice, and then apply. And then we have our two sprites. So we click the first one and the last one while pressing shift, right click, create, animation, and then jump animation. Now we can drag that jump animation to our animations folder. And if we go to our animation folder now, we can click on our animator component, and then we can add in our new animations. So here's our animator component. And now let's add in our running animation. So we just drag and drop the running animation, and we're going to do the same with the jumping animation. Now to transition between animations, all that you have to do is right click on idle, make transition, and then you can point and click wherever you want the state to lead to depending on the input. So then we click run animation. And then we can do the same from idle to jump. But we also want to be able to go back to idle if we're not moving. So from jump, we can go to idle. So make transition to idle. From run, we can right click, make transition to idle. And then we also want to be able to jump while we're running. So if we click on the run, right click, make transition to jump, we can also do that from jump, right click, make transition to run. And this is a basic state machine, changing states depending on the input. Some settings that we want to change. So between transitions, you can click the transition itself, and then it will give you some settings in the inspector. The one that we want to pay attention to is has exit time. So if this is selected, then the whole animation sequence will be completed before going on to the next state. In this case, we want to break up that animation because we don't care if the animation has been completed. So from the run to the jump, we deselect this. And this is useful if you want an animation to be completed throughout the whole way, like maybe the jump. But for running, we want it to be able to cut off, because if it starts over again, and let's say the length of the animation is from here to here, and then we're here on the animation and we jump, the animation won't actually display the jump animation until we go through the whole animation. And once we reach the end, then it'll jump. And that won't really make sense. And same thing from idle to jump, we can deselect has exit time. And same thing from idle to run, deselect has exit time. And once again, from run to idle, we can deselect that as well. So how do we actually change the states? What triggers it? So in the left side, we can see that we have a parameters tab in the animator component. So we can press parameters, and here we can click this plus button and add certain triggers or booleans. So in this case, for running, I want to be able to set a boolean, so true or false. So we click that plus button, boolean, and let's call that running or run. So now we have a boolean. So once this boolean is activated, so you can click the check bar to test it while the game is playing to see if the animation executes correctly. But to put the parameter between the animations themselves, we can click the transition, the little arrow. So from idle to run, we want the run boolean to be set to true. So basically, when we're in this state, we want that running boolean to be set to true. So right here, we can click conditions on the right, add to list, and it will automatically add our run, and it will change from idle to run when the run condition is true. And vice versa, if we want to go from run to idle, we click the other arrow and then we add that condition, but instead we set it to false. So when you stop running, then go back to the idle animation. And we can do that with the jump. So from the jump, if running is set to true, then we go into that running state. Alright, so what happens now when we jump? So jumping, we want it to be set as a trigger because you're only going to do that once at a time. So we want it to be like a trigger, and a trigger is something that happens and you want to cause something else to happen at that moment. A trigger. So to add a trigger, we go to parameters, plus we add that trigger, and let's call that trigger jump. So as you can see, you can activate a trigger by pressing the button there while you're in play mode to test it. And now, when we go from running to jumping, we can add the jump condition. So we add, and then under conditions, we can press jump. So whenever it jumps, it will automatically go to that state. And same from idle to jump, click that arrow, and we're gonna add that jump condition. So that's our state machine, or our animator controller. And now we can actually activate these parameters in code. So in the code, when we jump, we can tell our animator component to jump. In the next video, we'll be going over how to set up these animations within our player controller script. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and to be notified of new content, you can do that with either the subscribe, or you can also click the little bell notification to be sent notifications. So thanks, and see you next video.